Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our first Holocaust survivor speaker, who is Ellie Hacker, who is Ellie Grasse, who was born in Austria in March of 1929. Her brother and grandmother and mother had to flee Vienna through the Suez Canal and ended up in Shanghai, where they lived for 7 years. Her husband, Bill, joined the US Army in 1940, and after many assignments, arrived in Shanghai just as the war ended and was about to return home. But luck have it, they met crossing a street in the big city, fell in love, and married in 1945. Before he left for coming home to the United States. He was unable to bring Ellie home with him, but after 3 months, they were united stateside and lived many, many years together, had 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and 14 great-grandchildren. Sadly, Bill passed away in 2008 after being married to this lovely lady for 67 years. So at this time, I'm going to present to you Ellie Grasse, who will speak to us about her story.
A little closer.
Thank you very much. I'm a Holocaust survivor in a different way. When I was a little girl in Vienna, you heard when I was born, Hitler marched into Vienna March 12th and marched all night until my birthday. We stayed at my grandmother's house because my father and mother owned a place in an area outside of Vienna, a coffee house and restaurant. And somebody put the picture of Hitler up, and our housemaster said, "You better leave." So at 2 o'clock in the morning, we left for Vienna to be at my grandmother's house. My dad left soon after to go to, with his brother, to flee to Holland. After Hitler marched into Vienna, my grandmother's apartment was right on a main street. So we could hear Hitler's marching, the troops marching. When we woke up the next day, a very, very good friend of my mother, because my mother lived in that house many years, knocked on our door. "Any Jews here?" By that time, my grandmother's neighbor had hid us underneath her bed, and there were no Jews in the house. Soon after, before that, my uncle and his partner, who owned a coffee grinder, place, factory. The only place was available was Shanghai, China. So they took a ship to Shanghai, China. My uncle left enough money for my grandmother, my brother, my mother, and I to go to Shanghai. We escaped Vienna to Italy. We took a train to Italy to wait the Biancomano, which was a ship we were waiting for, to come, and so we could board it. When we crossed the border of Vienna and Italy, the Nazis came on board and took everything away. Any party that had jewelry or anything, they took it. The only thing, the one Nazi must have felt sorry for my mom. She was only 34 years old. The only thing he left her is a ring, and I carried that around every day. I had a watch, they took it away. And some of the Jewish people that were on the train were hiding money. When the Nazis found the money, they took them off the train, put them in a concentration camp or shot them. That's how bad it was. We lived in Italy for 4 weeks until the ship came back to Italy for us to board. My grandma, mom, and my brother and I didn't have that much money, so we were third class. There were lots of Jewish people, and they were first, second, and third class in those days. When we arrived in Shanghai, thank God, my uncle had bought a house. Some of the Jewish people had to stay in a warehouse where they had a bed and a bunk bed and a little something where they could keep their clothes. And there were two or three warehouses like that. We lived in a house. There were 15 of our family, my grandmother's brother, my grandmother's sister, and cousins. We all lived in the house. No running toilet. The coolies came every morning and picked up a pot. And we lived there for 7 years. When I was 12, and one thing, there was a very wealthy man, Sir Kaduri, and he opened the children because there were 20,000 Jews in Hongqiu. And so he opened a school, the Kaduri School, which we all went to. When I was 12, things were pretty bad. So I quit school and went to work as a hairdresser apprentice. I worked there very hard. I don't know how many heads I washed. And of course, then the Japanese occupied Shanghai, and they occupied where we lived, and we could not get out any place. There was a little Japanese, we called him the king of the Jews. His name was Goya. And if you needed a pass and you were a tall fellow, which some of the Jewish boys were, he would jump on the desk and slap them and wouldn't give them a permit. Before that, I forgot, we were on a ship to Shanghai, and we went through was 28 days, and went through the Suez Canal. And many of the young boys jumped off the ship to go to swim to Palestine, which was not, it was Palestine and it wasn't Israel. Of course, then in Shanghai, things became worse. The Japanese occupied Shanghai. They put their ammunition where the Jewish people lived, so to hide the ammunition. Things were getting pretty bad. You know, the Americans were coming, the English, the Australian, they were all emerging. You know, the war was really getting there. When I was at work as a hairdresser, in those days you had electric, you know, curling machines. When the Japanese women would come in and get their hair done, and of course, me being young, I forgot to turn the damn machine off. And some of the Japanese ladies came without hair off the machine. And I say, oh, that's the newest hairstyle ever. After that, the Japanese, not the Americans came to Shanghai. They bombed us every noon and every night, not knowing that there were Jewish people in that area. And also, later he became Admiral Zumwalt, but Zumwalt had the first ship where all the Japanese, you know, big ships, he invaded Shanghai. And on the other side, the army came. When the army came, of course, you already heard that my girlfriend and I went out the first day of also when they bombed us, many Jewish people died. We also had to have cholera and typhoid injections. And if you if you forgot your pass, they give you another cholera shot. It was really a bad, bad time. Very, very, food was terrible, Jewish people really suffered. But when the Americans came, my girlfriend and I went out the first day and we met these two fellows on a bridge. My husband's friend put his arms around my girlfriend. I thought, well, if he does that for me, he's out of here. Even though I was 16, I was going on 30. And anyhow, we met 4 weeks later. We were married, never lived together. And I encouraged him to leave Shanghai because the communists were on the way. When he left Shanghai 4 months later, I came on a troop ship, the USS Scott, with the wife of then, of course, Admiral Zumwalt, Musa. Musa and I became very good friends, and we saw each other many times. Even after the Admiral was the Admiral of the Navy, we did visit together. Like the lady said, I have had a wonderful marriage. When I came here, I could not speak English, so it was very hard for me. But and I tried not to have an accent. Anyhow, I have 4 children, 12 grandchildren, 14 great-grandchildren, and my life has been very good, except I miss my husband every day. Thank you. Is there any questions you have?
Just say it loud enough for everybody to hear.
How many years, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. How many years were you in Shanghai?
In Shanghai, I was 7 years in Shanghai.
And how many Jews were in your group?
20,000. When the war was over, there were probably about 17,000. Some of them immigrated to California, and there was a group of us that would meet once a month in Los Angeles for lunch just to see each other. They're all gone now. Yeah.
I don't know if the name rings the bell to you, but I had a dear friend who spent 10 years in Shanghai, Marion Schaefer.
What is that?
Marion Schaefer.
Oh, of course. I know Marion
Oh, I
Schaefer.
know.
How is she? Is she still? No, I didn't
She
think
passed
so.
away in New York.
Yeah,
Her daughter came and took her to New York.
Marion Schaefer
She
and
just
I.
passed the beginning of this year.
What's that?
She just passed away at the beginning of this year.
Oh,
She was.
I'm so sorry. I should have gotten in touch with
She
her.
was on the Federation board, according to
Yes,
Freya,
yes.
our historian.
Yeah, I was wondering about her. She and I used to go to this luncheon in Los Angeles, and she had a driver that would drive us there and back.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
yes. Very dear friend of mine.
Oh, yeah, she was a great lady, real fun.
She did survive over there with her mother.
Yeah.
Because first of all, she met her first husband there, and I saw pictures of her, the wedding day,
I
in
know
one
him.
of those Chinese.
Yeah,
But then the mother had a business there. They
Yeah.
opened a business of like a hotel and restaurant selling food.
Yeah.
So they survived. Oh, okay.
yeah, I knew her second husband too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Small world.
Does anybody else have a question for our speaker today?
Can you share you know, you, your mother, and your brother escaped to Shanghai. What happened to your father, to your father's
yeah.
brother? Where did they end up?
Yeah, my father, there were 18 people, his brother, and they were always going, Hitler was following them and they were fleeing through. They went to Holland, everywhere. Finally, you know, my mother remarried, and she had, in the Jewish religion, you have to have a death certificate of your husband before you can marry again. So they said he died on the side of the road. But one of my great granddaughters is very bright, and she went looking for things, and it said that he died in Auschwitz.
With his brother, Otto.
Yeah. Yeah, and my brother just recently died. The war really did a thing on him. He never married. He was a bacteriologist, but he got, what do you call it, schizophrenia? Yeah, and could not work in a hospital. So I have supported him all these years, and he just died in January. But he was a very strange fellow. Hitler did a thing on him, because he only was 4 years old when we left for Shanghai.
Ellie, can you share, when you lived in Austria, Vienna, how did the children treat you when you were in school once Hitler came to power?
I went to school in Vienna because we moved from Frieslau, which was from my, and when Hitler came, the kids were just terrible. And I went into they would really, call you names, and it got to be so bad that I wouldn't go to school anymore. They were that bad. And also, it was the funniest thing. People that you knew all your life, when Hitler came, it was like they never knew you. That was it. Like I say, my mother's friend, she grew up with him. He's the one that came looking for Jews. Many years, my husband and I went to Vienna, and we went to that house, and he was still alive. And I said, Hans, do you remember my mother? Oh, yes, he says, I remember. I said, do you remember looking for Jews? Oh, I couldn't remember. I don't remember that. So things turn.
Where were you during the Anschluss, where Hitler came on March 12th?
Oh, what?
During the Anschluss?
During the Anschluss.
During
The annexation, where were you?
in Vienna. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you
But
share what you experienced? Can you share what you experienced, what you and your family felt when that happened?
well, that was a thing about Jewish people. That's why many lost their lives. They could not believe that this could happen. When Schuschnigg was a president, or whatever you call it, from Austria, when he resigned, and Hitler made him resign, Jewish people thought this will just be over with. This will not happen. But it did. My grandfather had a haberdashery store below where we lived on this main street. The first thing they did is put Jew on the thing. And no, even he wasn't there anymore. Somebody else owned the store. They still did that. And you couldn't walk on the street. You had to walk. You couldn't walk on the sidewalk. You had to walk on the street. But we didn't stay there long enough for that. It was terrible, terrible times. Yeah. I hope I answered all your stories.
You have, Ellie, and thank you so much for
I
being
hope-
here today and sharing your heart-touching story with
You
us.
know, it's, when I do that, I have a hard time sleeping the night before. Because I think things come back. There's more things. I don't want to go into all this, details, but there were a lot of things that were tough. And to come to America at first was very tough. My husband's family were all Catholic, and they never had met a Jew. And it was really tough. My mother-in-law and my father-in-law, I never cooked because my grandmother had to cook on a hibachi.
Yeah.
We had to boil water to drink it. So, I never learned, but I learned fast enough.
But they accepted you and they loved you.
Well, at first they didn't, but after that, I was a favorite.
Oh,
I could do no wrong. And I did raise my children Catholic because I didn't want them to go through what I did. But they all know my story. And now I just had 2 great-grandchildren named in the temple.
Oh,
So what comes around turns around. So I'm really happy about my children all, they Hanukkah, they always celebrate with me and do. So, yeah.
Since you were a beautician in China, did you pursue the same career here?
did you pursue the same career as a beautician once you came to the United States? Left it behind.
No, I never worked. My husband was in the equipment rental business. And so, no, I never worked.
No, you did work all the work in the house.
What's that?
You did all the work of raising 4 children.
Oh, yeah.
That's work.
yeah. So,
You just didn't get a check.
yeah. And then after my kids left house, I decided to work somewhere. And I worked at what now is Macy's,
Oh, yes.
I went in there and they interviewed me and I worked in the notions department. Well, within 2 months, I was manager of the notion department. But the funny thing was, my husband said it cost him more for taxes, me
Yeah.
working.
Is this in Los Angeles?
Huh?
Is this in Los Angeles?
Was it in Los Angeles that you worked at Macy's?
Oh, what?
Was it in Los Angeles that you
Yeah,
worked
yeah,
at Macy's?
yeah.
The
Well,
one-
Burbank. I
Oh,
lived
Burbank.
We raised all our family in Burbank. I still own my home in Burbank because my oldest son is divorced and raised 2 of his kids. And so he lives in the house. So,
Oh,
yeah.
really?
Well, we're going to end the recorded part of our presentation with again, thank you
oh, thank you
for
for
sharing
having
your
me.
story.
Yeah.
But just
yeah.
because the recording is ending doesn't mean you can't come and ask a question if you still have a question for Ellie. Thank you. It was so
Thank you.
touching.
I hope I
Bless you.
didn't